I sometimes wish that I had tongue blocked from day one. Do you have your students tongue blocking straight away?
Absolutely, yeah. Let me state a couple things, because I learned from a pucker, and there's quite a few people who learn from the pucker embouchure, and it's a valid embouchure, and you can create great music being a pucker player. Sometimes there's this debate between pucker playing versus tongue block playing, and as long as we're just thinking about that these are techniques available to us as harmonica players, it's not a judgmental thing on which one is better. From a pure technical standpoint, there are a lot more things available to you in a tongue block. There's really only one. Well, it really gets down to articulation. It's not about playing fast, but your ability to articulate fast that is key in the pucker embouchure. So if you're going for the speed of articulation with someone like Jason Ritchie, for example, then that quick ability to articulate is very important. If you're not necessarily going for that, then that's not much of an issue. Certain techniques like the Junior Wells, a lot of those type of techniques, yeah, I'm going to pucker for those type of things. But besides that, if we were to list, we were talking about Carlos Del Junco a little bit before, at the Trossingen Harmonica Masters workshops, I led a class where he said, okay, we're going to present list how many ways you can present one note in the harmonica. For example, 4-draw, you can dip in it, tremolo, vibrato, 2-note combination, 4 with 5, tongue blocking, slap, flutters, etc. And this list is going 20, 30, 40, and that's kind of the common length of the list. It was getting to 50, 60, 70 ways to play one note of the harmonica, and I had to go for rehearsal, and I was like, I don't want to leave. This is pretty cool. Joe Feliska was there, Carlos Del Junco. Who else was there at that workshop? Steve Baker, of course. And we had the whole student body was there. It was pretty cool. That big list, the majority of those techniques can be done in the tongue block embouchure, and a lot of them can only be done in tongue block embouchure. And if somebody wants to play traditional blues harmonica, those players were primarily playing that way. So you have Sonny Williamson, 1, 2, Little Walter, Big Walter Horton. There are players, Junior Wells, for example, primarily pucker harmonica player, but also use tongue blocking for certain techniques. So getting back to before I go off into too much detail about the differences between the embouchures, just to answer your question, is that for those of you out there who learned primarily in a pucker embouchure, think about adding tongue blocking so you can make available to you the sounds that are tongue block specific. Your slaps, your pulls, your octaves, your slaps, and the associated techniques like the floater tongue. Pulls, something I noticed you're writing about juke for NHL, the National Harmonica League. When you play the last 4 bars of the opening chorus, it's not bad. I'm playing it all in the right rhythm. I'm playing it musically with good dynamics, but it's missing some of the swing quality to it. Now when I'm adding those very, very slight chord on the upbeat that we call pulls, now it starts to have that rhythmic drive that was so important to Little Walter's playing. So that's technique number 2, pull, and then octaves. That's what you hear. Junior Wells, even though primarily a pucker player, is going to use some of these tongue blocking techniques. So by teaching someone tongue blocking from the very beginning, then you get rid of some of the issues of making that transfer. Commonly somebody learns pucker, they learn how to bend in a pucker, then they learn to, if they come across someone who can help them with the tongue block, they learn the tongue block coming on holes 4, 5, and 6 and above, where we tend to not be doing as much bending. So they would pucker, moving around the harmonica with the pucker embouchure bending. Then they might go and start tongue blocking for the 6, 5, and 4, where they're not going to be bending as much. But what happens is usually around the 4-year mark is they're studying material that does not allow them to make that switch so quickly. If they're doing their own music, combining their own licks in their own way, which can be influenced by the great players that come before them, but when then that can be fine. but they'll start running to playing like Cotton's Creeper, for example, by James Cotton, where he's doing this lick, which is the main lick of the song. There's a bend on that 4-drop. Can't do that on a pucker. Nowhere close to the same sound quality. So what happens is that 4-year mark, players start to run into problems like, I really need to learn how to tongue block bend to be able to make this lick or these transitions work. And then you kind of have a 6-month period of time where they kind of have to go to the woodshed again, learn how to tongue block bend, learn how to incorporate both of those together. And I went through that. I went through a year of sounding like crap for me to learn how to tongue block bend and control the harmonica across the entire range, mostly talking about bending. And then I could choose as a player where I wanted to go. So when I started teaching tongue blocking from the beginning, bending and everything, a lot of the problems that tends to rear itself in the 2-year to 4-year time range just disappear. And tone generally is not so much an issue anymore. When people go to pucker on the harmonica, they'll tend to do that. And everything, whenever we close our embouchure down, it creates a small cavity that is not resonant. What makes this bass so resonant has nothing to do with the strings, but this big, large, resonant body. So when you tongue block, if I were to pucker, we get a larger tone. Now, I'm not saying that someone who's puckering can't, because you can, of course, drop your jaw and make sure everything stays open. So that's kind of inaccurate in that respect. But when somebody's tongue blocking, they're going to open their mouth more from the very beginning. And there's less tendency to allow the back of the tongue to raise, which is responsible for a lot of evil on the harmonica. Notes start to bend. It's that dreaded 2-drop sound with new players because the back of their tongue is raised up, causing that note to want to basically bend. So when someone's tongue blocking, there's a tendency to use less of that hump of the back of the tongue. And from the very beginning, players tend to have a lot better tone and start sounding good right from the beginning. So, yeah, from a technique standpoint, they don't have to go through that switchover period, and their tone tends to sound better from the very beginning. And the tongue blocking stuff is actually fairly easy. The slaps, the pulls, the octaves, they develop that pretty quick. Bending, just whether you're puckering, tongue blocking, U-blocking, whatever embouchure that you want to use, bending takes time to develop for anybody. So we might as well just do the tongue block and not have to worry about where to switch and when, and etc. There's some pretty passionate people out there, and they have this feeling that if you don't tongue block, they're getting this impression from people, if you don't tongue block, you're not a serious player. This is about music. You can play music with any embouchure you want and create music with extreme impact. You listen to Lee Oscar, for example, phenomenal musician. He's not tongue blocking anything that he's playing, but you can't say that he's not one of the most soulful harmonica players ever to live. So the techniques we use to present our music doesn't matter. But if we allow ourselves to have an open mind towards learning different types of techniques, then we can decide which ones we're going to use when. So for you pucker players out there, add tongue blocking to your sound. Don't feel that your music is any less valid. If you're not using that technique, it just gives you more options. And if you have that open mind, then of course your music will grow without those limitations. And I think that's just something important to say to our players like myself and like Mark Hummel and like Gary Smith, people that are players that we should aspire to play like, that went through that same transition. And it's up to them how they utilize those tools.